probably for the 12th time today. Happy New Year. Glad to have you here at The Journey. Thanks for hanging out with us on this first Sunday of 2026. Kind of looking back at 2025, I hope you had a great 2025. Here at The Journey, we had a pretty incredible one. We saw more people in groups than we've ever seen before. We have more leaders in place than we have ever had. We think we're still finalizing some of our financials. We think it's our best giving year that we've ever had. But probably my favorite number is that we saw 43 people take a step of baptism in 2025. And so really just an amazing year. We're going to get more details about this year over the next couple of weeks. So be looking forward to that. But here we are. It is a brand new year. It is 2026. I think that means we're closer to 2050 than we are the year 2000. Is that right? Which is absolutely crazy to think about. But I want to start talking about a topic that I think most churches are probably talking about here at the beginning of the year. I want to start with biology, okay? Did you know, most churches aren't talking about biology today. I don't know if you know that. But do you know you have 70 trillion cells in your body? Out of those 70 trillion cells, about 40 trillion of them are bacterial in nature. Those cells are pretty simple. They're kind of dumb, honestly. They wander around. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But you got about 40 trillion of those in your body. 30 trillion of the cells in our body are known as human cells, and 7 trillion of them have a nucleus in them. And in each one of those nucleuses, we find DNA. Now, what is DNA? DNA acts as a blueprint or an instruction manual for building and operating you, okay? DNA shapes you. You are who you are because of DNA. It shapes you through your physical traits, your eye color, the texture of your hair, your height, the skin color that you have, the tone of your skin. All of that comes from DNA. Your biological tendencies come from DNA. Your metabolism, your athletic potential or lack of athletic potential comes from DNA. How you sleep at night, your pain sensitivity, all of these things come from your DNA. And health risks do too. Your likelihood of getting certain diseases, how you process medications, the strength of your immune system. Again, all this stuff comes from our DNA. Everything about you that makes you, you and me, all of that flows from DNA. And so as we start this brand new year, as we start 2026, we're going to talk about DNA, and that is the values that we have as a church. It's who or what makes us who we are. And so we're going to spend these next few weeks talking about DNA. Now, some of you, when you hear that word values, you're thinking to yourself, I've been here a long time. I didn't know we had values. You would kind of be right. Every organization actually has values. Do you write those values down and do you live those values out? Okay? We haven't written those down until recently, but values are important. They're powerful. They help us understand who we are and why we do what we do. Now, I've shared with you, if you were here at the end of last year, I've shared with you that over the past couple of years, we've actually been working on our vision as a church. Like, who are we? Why do we exist? And we came up with this. We are a movement of people on mission together to help more and more people know and follow Jesus here in Northern Virginia. That is our vision. That is what we believe that God has called us to do and who we are called to be as a church. And so as we work through that vision, we also solidified our values. And again, now we have those written down. And so we can actually walk through those and live those out. But those values are so important to us. Those values fuel the mission of Jesus that we are on together, and they guide us down the path of the vision, again, we believe God has called us to as a church. Those values are our DNA. However, before we start walking through what our values are as a church and that DNA, it feels like we need to start with something a little bit more foundational. And so I want to talk today about the why, because we need to understand the why before we can actually understand how these values play into who we are. Some of you are probably familiar with Simon Sinek. He is a leadership and organizational consultant. Back in, I think, around 2009, he did a TED Talk, and he talked about these three circles, like you see there on the screen. And in each one of these circles, he put a word and said, hey, this is how most organizations work. And so in that outer circle, the big circle, he put the word what. He said organizations need to know what they do. And most organizations know exactly what they do. Like, what products do you sell, or what services do you offer? Here in the church, we know our what. And in fact, most churches do the exact same what's, right? What is what we do right here? This is coming together and worshiping together. Groups are a what. The things that we do in the community, those are what's. And so most organizations know what those what's are. In that middle circle, we have this word how. And the how is how you do the what's, okay? How do we make those widgets? How do we make those products? How do we offer these services? For us here in the church world, how do we get volunteers? How do we put people into groups? How do we plan the events and programs that we do? How is that next question that we have there that we have to answer? Now, here's what Sinek says. He says that for most organizations, or actually for all organizations, they understand their what. Most know the how, but very few know the why. And yet the why is the reason that organizations exist. And so over these next few moments, I want to talk about our why. Because as a church, I think we're pretty good at the what and we're pretty good at the how, but those things actually don't really matter if we don't understand the why behind them. And if we aren't understanding the why and living out that why, then everything else, honestly, at some point just falls apart. Now, I'm going to do this by talking through Jesus and his interaction with his disciples and a few experiences, a few events in his life with them. But I want to start at the beginning with these disciples. I want to start in Matthew chapter 4, starting with verse 18. Here's what we read. One day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus spent actually a lot of time there at the Sea of Galilee, walking along the shore. Now, the Sea of Galilee was very important in those days because of the fishing industry that was a part of it. They didn't eat a lot of meat, right? They ate a ton of fish. And where did you get your fish? Well, you got it from the Sea of Galilee. And so when you read about people like Peter and Andrew and some of the other disciples here and them being in the fishing industry, it probably meant they were business owners. And not only were they business owners, it probably meant they were actually doing pretty well because, again, the fishing industry was so important to the people in those days. And so Jesus is walking along, sees these two guys doing their normal work, and he says something to them. Look at verse 19. Jesus called out to them, "Come follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. So here's Jesus who shows up at their place of work and says, "Hey, you two, I want you to come follow me." And how do they respond? They drop everything, right? They drop their job, they drop their paycheck, they drop their families, they drop their lives, and they go and follow Jesus. But these aren't the only two guys that day that do that. Look at verse 21. A little farther up the shore, he saw two other brothers, James and John, sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee, repairing their nets. And he called them to come too. They immediately followed him, leaving the boat and their father behind. So here, a little bit further down on the shore, we see James and John. Jesus sees them, goes to them, and is like, "Hey guys, come and follow me." And what do? They do the exact same thing we see Peter and Andrew do. They leave everything. They leave family. They leave their possessions. They leave their homes. They leave their jobs, their paychecks, and they go and follow Jesus. When you read this, kind of get the feeling like, does Jesus have some Jedi mind trick, right? Come and follow me. And they're like robots, like, yes, we will come and follow you. It's like this mystical piece to this, right? It's like, oh man, this is pretty amazing. But I honestly believe for us to fully understand what has really taken place here, what we have to do is go back and look at the Jewish educational system and religious system of the day. And so I kind of want to walk us through that because I believe it really begins to help us understand better what's happening here as Jesus chooses these disciples. At the age of 6, Jewish boys were sent to the synagogue to start their schooling and to learn from the rabbi there. Now, some of you are like, what about the ladies? What about the girls? The girls did all their studying at home. That's just the way things were in those days. But from the age of 6 to the age of 10, these boys were in what was called the house of the book, okay? And so for 4 years, they read, they recited, and they memorized the Jewish Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of our Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So from the age of 6 to the age of 10, they memorized those 5 books. Now, at the end of those 4 years, the best of those students would actually advance to the next level of education, and it was known as the House of Learning. That lasted for another 4 years. Now, those that were in this program, they memorized the Tanakh, which we know as our Old Testament. So those 39 books of the Old Testament, from Genesis to Malachi, these 10 to 14-year-old young kids, students, memorized all of those words. Now, a part of that was that these rabbis then would help them to understand it. So a part of this wasn't just memorization. You were learning more about it. You were asking questions and learning how to ask questions so you could better understand what you were reading. They would bring oral traditions from the past, from other rabbis in, and say, hey, this is what they said about this. What do you think about this? So they're learning how to debate and how to ask questions and how to listen. I mean, this was a huge program. Again, this is from 10 to 14. They're in this house of learning, memorizing those 39 books and understanding how to understand or to ask questions about the text. At the age of 14, you would apply to be a part of a rabbi's house of study. Now, I'm sorry there was no house of rock for you to apply to, which would have been fun, but maybe they'll add that later. I don't know. But you would apply to be in this house of study. And this meant that you would go to a rabbi, whatever rabbi you wanted to follow, and you would say, hey, I want to be your Talmud. I want to be our word is disciple. And so you would go to this rabbi and say, I want to follow you. I want to be like you. These rabbis would then go through an interview process with each one of these students that wanted to follow them. And they would ask them all kinds of questions. What do you understand about Scripture? Well, here, tell me about this. This is what you've read. This is what you've heard. What do you believe? Can you debate this? Can you give me some feedback on what this other person has said? I mean, they are just hitting them with all kinds of different questions and interviewing them, trying to decide whether this student should follow them. And they would even ask him, do you think you can follow me? Do you think you can actually be like me? At the end of this process, after these rabbis had interviewed each student, they would give them one of two responses. They would say, either go home and learn the family trade, which, as you can imagine, would have been like a dagger through many of these young boys' hearts, or they would say, come and follow me. Leave everything else behind. Leave your family, leave your life, and come and follow me. Why is this pertinent to our topic today? Well, first off, these guys don't come to Jesus and say, hey, we want to follow you, right? What Jesus says, he goes to them and says, hey, come and follow me. And by the way, when we kind of think about the religious education system of the Jewish people, what does this mean about the disciples Jesus chooses? They weren't chosen, right? They're not the best of the best. They're not the smartest. They're not the brightest. And at some point in time, someone told them, hey, you actually need to go back home and you need to learn the family business. And it's in those places that Jesus meets them, right? He meets them as they're working in their family fishing business or as a tax collector or as a tradesman. And he goes to these 12 guys and he says, hey, I want you to come and follow me. And by the way, these guys Jesus chooses, again, I don't think it's like the movies where they're like 40 to 50 years old. married, 2.5 kids, white picket fence. They got a mortgage. They're working on their 401k, playing pickleball every weekend. These aren't the guys Jesus chooses. The guys Jesus chooses are probably still teenagers. And maybe a few of them are in their 20s. These are young teenagers, young men that Jesus says, come and follow me. But what is he asking them to do? He's not giving them a syllabus, right? He's not saying, hey, for this semester, here's what we're going to study. Here's my syllabus. We're going to walk through this. You're going to have 4 papers you got to write. You've got these 2 tests that you've got to take. No, he says, I want you to come and to be like me. I want you to come to follow me. And that is actually what these disciples would do. When these students, when they were actually when the rabbis would say, hey, come and follow me, they were becoming like the rabbi, to the point that you would study everything about that rabbi. You would study how they prayed, how they interacted with people who were poor, how they interpreted Scripture. You would even get to the place of where you would watch them tie their sandals, and however they tied their sandals, you wanted to emulate that yourself. You would watch them how they ate, and you would want to eat like them. I read a couple of things that said there were instances where disciples would follow them to the bathroom, and they wanted to do everything just like the rabbi. You were trying to become just like that person you were following. In fact, there's an old Jewish proverb that says, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. Meaning, may you become so much like your rabbi that his life would fully shape you, that no one could tell the difference between the two of you. And so when Jesus says, come and follow me, what he meant was come and be like me. And this is an invitation these guys never got. And so when he says, come and follow me, it's kind of like the Godfather, right? It was an offer they couldn't refuse. Because for them, this was a big deal. Maybe some of them had dreamed for years about being a disciple of a rabbi. And they made it through the first 4 years, but didn't make the cut after those first 4 years. And they made it through those first 8 years, but didn't make the cut to be a part of this rabbi's group of study, this house of study. And so for them, now this dream is finally coming true. Or maybe they encountered Jesus at some point. Now, Jesus had actually done quite a bit of teaching and even some miracles before he chooses his disciples. So I'm guessing some of them had seen Jesus in action, maybe heard the stories of Jesus, experienced Jesus in some way. And so when Jesus came and said, hey, come and follow me, that was a no-brainer for them. Yeah, there's something about you. We want to follow you. Some of them were actually disciples of John the Baptist. John the Baptist was sort of the precursor to Jesus, setting the stage for Jesus to come. And so they had been there when Jesus was baptized. They saw what happened that day. They heard John the Baptist probably talk about Jesus ad nauseum, to the point of, like, this guy ever shows up, man, we got to see what the deal is. And so when Jesus shows up and says, come and follow me, they're like, yep, we're intrigued. We're going to follow you. But for some reason, they drop everything to follow Jesus. But they knew something about Jesus. It wasn't like Jesus was unknown to them. There was some encounter, some story, something about him. And so when he says, come and follow me, every single one of these guys easily say yes. But why do they say yes? What is it about Jesus that made Jesus different? Well, I think Jesus says what that difference is in John 10:10. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Like, that's the why of Jesus. Like, that's what Jesus wants to give to all people. And the Greek here actually means super abundant, right? It's not just talking about to the full. It's talking about this super abundance of life. That the why of Jesus is to give life meaning and to give life purpose and to make life worth living, to rebuild this relationship that we need to have with God. The why of Jesus is to help people experience the fullness of the life, the superabundance of life that we can have when we are doing everything to follow Jesus. And so what does Jesus do? Over those next 3 years, he invests in those 12 disciples so they could actually experience that superabundance of life with him during that time. And he tells them, I want you to become like me, right? I want you to take on my DNA. I want some of my dust to settle on you. And it's over that time that they spend with Jesus that they fully begin to understand the why of following Jesus. And I think we kind of see that play out of what that why is as we look towards the end of Jesus' time on earth. Matthew 28, Jesus has already been crucified and come back to life. He spent about 40 days on earth seeing people. He's getting ready to head back into heaven, and he says this, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Now, when I read this, there's a little why in here, but there's a lot of what's and how's that we see here, right? Teach my ways. Baptize people as they become followers of mine. Make more disciples. Go and do this. But that's why I love what Luke writes in the book of Acts. And he tells a part of this story too as Jesus is getting ready to go back in heaven. He says, here's what Jesus says in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. And you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Jesus is saying, this is what it looks like to follow me. Right? This is my why for being here, to help transform and change people's lives through following me. But your why is to now go tell this story and tell my story to the world so they can experience a super abundant life just like you. This is the why of Jesus, and this is the why of the church. But why does that matter to you and to me? Well, we live in a culture that is obsessed with self-improvement, right? It is why we make goals and resolutions at the beginning of probably every single year. Maybe yours this year is I want to be more productive in 2026. I want to lose weight and get in shape in 2026. I want to fix my finances in 2026. And we all have different things that we probably want to work on. But most resolutions fail, okay? Listen to these statistics. 25% of people who make resolutions in a brand new year are done by January 7th. You got 3 days to work really hard, people, okay? Give it everything you got for those next 3 days. 43% are done by January 14th, 2 weeks in. Did you know that's known as Quitter's Day? So maybe you want to celebrate, finish up on the 14th and be a quitter too. But anyway, 50% are done by the end of January. 80% are done by the end of February. Only 8 to 9% actually fulfill the goal or resolution that they set for themselves at the beginning of the year, okay? Why do so many of us fail at this? It's not because we don't know the what or how. Right? Let's say we want to lose 25 pounds this year. Hey, guess what? We already know the what. We want to lose 25 pounds. We know the how. It's not that hard. Exercise, eat healthy, right? It's pretty simple to do. We know the what and hows. It's not the what and hows that tend to get us stuck. Our resolutions fail because we don't know why we're actually doing them. We're just saying, hey, I'm going to lose this weight. But if you're saying this year I'm going to lose weight, your whys might be, I want to be healthy so I feel better. I want to be healthy so I can have more confidence. Or I want to be healthy so I can have energy for my family or live longer. And so whether your goal is losing weight or some other goal that you have, all those are great. But we're only going to stick to those things when we understand and believe in our why. Let me talk about this in the church setting. In the church world, we know our whats. This is a what right here, right? I said this a little bit earlier. Being here on a Sunday morning, this is a what. Being in a group, groups are whats. The work we do in the community, those are our whats. But what happens when those things change? Our music style changes, or there's some different people in your group than the semester before, or the work that we do in the community, it's not the community organizations you want us to work with. When our whats aren't satisfied, we actually start to get a little bit disgruntled. And many times that's when we leave a church. Now that's your prerogative, right? This is an entirely volunteer organization if you think about it. Not only do you volunteer to serve, but you're volunteering to be here. I don't think, hopefully, any of you were forced to be here this morning. Maybe one or two of you, but most of you are probably here because you actually want to be here. Now, I'm not saying the what's and hows aren't important. I think they're very, very important. But if that's what you focus on when it comes to the church, and you're focused on the what's and you're focused on the hows, you're going to be disappointed every church that you go to, and eventually you will leave. Like, we don't exist to fulfill your what's or hows, or even my what's and hows. That's not why we exist. And yet, oftentimes, we think the church exists for me, right? That the church is all about me. It's about self-improvement for me. How are you helping me? How are you helping me become a better person? That's not why the church exists. And following Jesus isn't some self-improvement plan either. Following Jesus means we are surrendering ourselves to something bigger than you or me. We're surrendering ourselves to something that is longer lasting. We're surrendering ourselves to something that is eternal. And to be able to surrender ourselves to something, it's not about the what's and hows. We won't surrender ourselves to that, just like a resolution or a goal. But we will surrender ourselves to a why. And Jesus says, I came to give a super abundant life to people. And so for us as a church, that's why our why is we want to see more and more people know and follow Jesus. We didn't make that up on our own, okay? We didn't pull that out of the air. That's biblical, that's scriptural. We just read through some of that. That's what we believe the church is called to do. We want to see more and more people experience a super abundant life that comes through following Jesus. And the reason is because we believe Jesus transforms people's lives. That he not only transforms you and as an individual or me as an individual, he transforms marriages and dating relationships and parenting, transforms our homes, the places we work, our neighborhoods. He transforms communities, our world. And again, he transforms you and me. That's why we believe in this why of following Jesus, to see more and more people know and follow him. And so as this brand new year begins, I want to offer you 4 invitations to join us in some way, or it may be something personal for you, so that we can experience as individuals and as a church that super abundant life. So here's those 4 invitations I want to offer you today. Here's the first one. For some of you, you need to take those words, come and follow me, seriously. That maybe for some time you've been kind of wavering back and forth on this whole Jesus thing. Well, Jesus says, come and follow me. And so for you, that may mean taking that step of baptism. We believe that is one of the most important steps that we take in our faith journey. We also believe it may be one of the first steps that we take in our faith journey. That we may not be there yet, that we don't have it all figured out yet, that we're just still trying to figure out Jesus and who we are. But there's something about Jesus that we're like, I can't walk away from that. There's something important there. Maybe I don't quite know what it is yet, but it's more than a what and a how. There's a why behind that. I want to experience that super abundant life through Christ. I want to be transformed. And for you, it may be taking that step of baptism. Again, we believe that's an important part of our spiritual journey. There's statistics that say that churches that have 1 out of every 20 people that get baptized, like you're doing a really great job of helping people know and follow Jesus. For us in 2025, based on our numbers, we saw 1 in 13 people take that step of baptism. What does that mean? I think it means we understand the why, right? That we understand the why, that we are here to help people know and follow Jesus. And maybe for some of you, it's taken that first step to say, hey, I want to know and follow Jesus too. And if you'd like more information about that, you want to take that step, you got questions, you can stop by our Next Step table. Again, you can sign up through our QR code or our app because we believe that's such an important part. So some may need to come and follow Jesus. Second invitation I have is, Joel talked about this already, this rooted experience over 10 weeks. Kara and we did that last summer. Joel did a pilot program with about 20 of us. And I had never been through Rooted before. Joel and I know churches that do Rooted on a consistent basis, and every single one said, hey, this is life-changing for people. And so we did a pilot program in the summer, and I like to think I've been around the church for a few years, and it was life-changing for me. There was a lot in that I learned myself. And so for some of you, you might be like, hey, I'm following Jesus, but I don't really know what that looks like. What is that why? Jump into Rooted. Be a part of that as we head into this new year. And again, all my buddies I've talked to said everybody is changed once they leave being a part of that group. So invite you to sign up for that. Like Joel said, he's going to be back at the Next Step table. If you got questions about that, ask him. But jump into Rooted this year. It's a great way to understand what it means to know and follow Jesus. My third invitation is to those of you that have been here at the Journey for a while, right? And you already got the hows and whats down. And if you've been here for a little bit, maybe you're okay with the hows and whats of what we do. And it may be time to hold on to the why. Maybe now's the time that you jump and it's like, hey, I get the why, and now I need to be a part of that. I want to help more and more people know and follow Jesus here in this area. And so jump into a group. Again, as Joel was talking about, jump in to serve this year. You can stop by our Next Step table. They will answer those questions. But it's such an important part of how we help people understand what it means to know and follow Jesus by getting our own hands dirty within that so that we can experience the superabundance of life as we interact with more people, but as we see more and more people know and follow Jesus too. So jump into the why here at this church. And then lastly, my last invitation is come back next week, okay? I set you up with the why. And now over the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk to you about this DNA. We're going to talk to you about the values of this church and how they respond to that why. What makes us who we are. And I'm excited for this series as we start this year because I think it's, because again, we've written down our values. We know what they are. And what does it look like for us to live them out? You know, as I think about Jesus, he didn't recruit those disciples with a cool strategy. He didn't have some really neat marketing plan that he pulled out to get them to come follow him. There weren't fancy lights, amazing building, none of that kind of stuff. But I want you to notice something else. He didn't tell them before they followed him, hey, first thing I need you to do is stop sinning. He didn't say, I need you to fix yourself or lose your bad habits or try harder or read more scripture or pray more. He didn't say any of that to them. What does he say? Come and follow me. And they did. And over the next 3 years, they began to understand the why behind that. And after that, what happened to them? They're the ones who, with God's Spirit in them, they're the ones who lived out the mission of Jesus. And you and I are here today because of those guys that Jesus chose to say, come and follow me. And our lives get to be changed and transformed because people said, come, or Jesus said, come and follow me, and they did just that. Well, Jesus says the same to us, come and follow me. Let's change the world. Let a little bit of my dust settle on you this year. And let's see what happens.